This is a Rattle and Hum Sports podcast for October the 2nd. It's a Wednesday night, and I'm Bryan Houston, and we're glad to have with us right now, covering the Dallas Cowboys for Rattle and Hum Sports, Matthew Postins. How you doing, Matthew?
Fine, Bryan. How are you?
Doing well, thank you very much. Cowboys coming off the loss to San Diego, having to answer a lot of uncomfortable questions about that loss, and getting ready to take on the seemingly unbeatable greatest team in the century, Denver Broncos, this week.
The greatest team of the century this month.
That's right, exactly. Several things that have come out since we last talked. First of all, Morris Claiborne benched in favor of Orlando Scandrick. What can you tell us about that?
Well, this is a guy, Morris Claiborne, who actually came out today and said that he's having a bit of a confidence problem with the new defense. This is a guy who played a lot of man at LSU, played a lot of man last year under Bryan, and now this year he's being asked to play primarily zone. And he says he's having some issues adjusting, and it's kind of impacted his confidence a little bit. He believes that he can get that back and get to the point where he can contribute. But right now, to be fair, Scandrick has played better in the defense through the first 4 games than Claiborne has. So maybe it's just a necessary evil right now defensively that they, give Claiborne a break a little bit. Let him come off the bench, put him in some lower pressure situations, and get him a bit more acclimated to the defense than he is now. We talked about the cover 2 frequently over the past several months, and the framework of the defense is pretty simple, but executing it the way Monty Kiffin wants it executed is difficult, and maybe he just hasn't gotten there yet.
Okay, and in the meantime, Scandrick is playing terrific. You mentioned that. So do they bring Claiborne off the bench and put him against the slot receivers now? Is that how that's going to work?
Well, when I was in Tampa covering the Bucks, and Kiffin was the defensive coordinator, Rondé Barber was obviously one of the starting cornerbacks for that team. And on first and second down, he would play on the outside. Well, on third down, he would actually move to the inside, and they would bring in a guy like Philip Buchanan to play that outside role on obvious passing downs. This could be a situation where you could still see Claiborne on the outside on third downs, and have them shift Scandrick inside and make him kind of that nickel corner in that Rondé Barber type role. But you're definitely going to see more of Scandrick on first and second down playing defense on that outside guy opposite Brandon Carr. But I'm going to be interested to see what Monty does Sunday with those 2 particular guys on third down. Will he keep Scandrick outside? Will he move Claiborne inside? My gut tells me he'll probably move Scandrick inside and keep Claiborne outside on third downs, because I think that's what Claiborne is more comfortable with, being on that outside corner position as opposed to being in the slot.
All right, well, they've made the move, then they've decided that Morris Claiborne can't be in the starting lineup. Based on performance and looking at some of the numbers, Bruce Carter, in linebacker right now, has been targeted and given up more passing yardage and pass completions than anybody in the league right now. Gave up over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on Sunday. What are they going to do about him?
Well, right now they're giving starters reps to Ernie Sims, who's been hurt the past couple of weeks with a groin injury the past couple of weeks. And it doesn't sound like they've made a decision yet as to what they're going to do at that weak side linebacker position, but they're definitely exploring their options. Carter might still start on Sunday against Denver, but you're definitely going to see Ernie Sims out on the field frequently. The value that Ernie Sims had coming into this season was that he had played every position in the cover 2 as far as linebacker was concerned, and that he was a good fit at that weak side linebacker position. And he certainly would have given Bruce Carter more competition had he been a little bit more healthier during training camp. So now that he's healthy, now that he's ready to go, I don't know necessarily if he starts on Sunday, but we're definitely going to see plenty of him. And if Bruce Carter continues to have the coverage problems that he's had the past few weeks, you could very well see the Cowboys pull Carter completely and leave Sims out there full-time with Sean Lee and Justin Durant.
This has to be a bit of a shock to the Cowboys that Carter has struggled so much.
Yeah, and it's a bit surprising to me, too, because Carter certainly has the skill and certainly has the speed to keep up with most everybody in the NFL. Weak side linebacker has to be extremely quick and has to be able to cover well. Again, this could be a result of just the adjustment period, moving from the 3-4 to the 4-3 and playing, in the cover 2. Again, you're playing an area as opposed to playing a person coming off the line of scrimmage. And, I think the Cowboys probably looked at the film last week, looked at the fact that Carter was exploited by a smart player in Danny Woodhead, who's definitely not nearly as quick as Bruce Carter is, and maybe they feel as if, like Claiborne, they maybe need to give him a bit of a mental break. Sometimes when you have young players, they get in these situations and they have a lack of success stacked upon a lack of success. Sometimes they just need a brain break, so to speak, like most of us need at work. You get up from your desk, you walk around for 15 minutes and let your brain rest. Maybe that's what Bruce Carter needs. Morris Claiborne was talking yesterday about how he's thinking too much on the field. Well, in football, it's all about repetition and all about instinct. You don't want to do a lot of thinking. So maybe Carter's in the same boat right now.
Okay, and then on top of that, these problems in the secondary, at linebacker, and then the defensive line got zero pass rush on Phillip Rivers last Sunday against San Diego. And you've got 3 defensive ends on the injury report right now. DeMarcus Ware with the strained back, George Selby with a concussion and didn't practice, and Edgar Jones, a defensive end who never plays, is also suffering with a groin injury right now. I mean, the last thing they need is another hit to their depth on the defensive line, particularly at defensive end right now.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that last week, how in the short term we felt like they were in good shape, but in the long term I had concerns about their depth. Well, here we are. I feel pretty confident that Marcus Ware is going to play on Sunday, but George Selby may very well not play. Now that he's been classified as having a concussion, the NFL's concussion protocol kicks in, and one of those protocols is that you can't have any contact for 7 days, and there's some question as to whether or not Selby will be able to play on Sunday because of that rule. As you mentioned, Edgar Jones really doesn't play that much. The Cowboys were probably envisioning a bigger role for him, but if he's not able to go, that hurts them from a depth standpoint. I mean, you're looking at a situation where DeMarcus Ware could be starting opposite Kyle Wilber, and I can tell you right now, Kyle Wilber's not going to take the heat off of DeMarcus Ware. It really puts the Cowboys in a bind because there's really no dangerous pass rusher on that other side, so teams can feel free to double-team DeMarcus Ware, and that's going to make it very difficult for the Cowboys to manufacture a pass rush against the Broncos.
Now, I know that in some areas the Cowboys are vastly improved defensively over what they were last year, but 2 ball games now, they've given up over 400 yards passing, and that's got to be an area of major concern for the Cowboys right now.
Yeah, I think it is, and we've talked a lot about the deep middle, how this team is having some difficulty covering the deep middle. Phillip Rivers really exploited it. Eli Manning really exploited it, and this defense is middle driven. In other words, the best players on the team typically are up the middle, at the under tackle, at the middle linebacker, at the weak side linebacker, and at the safety positions. That's where your best athletes are. In the cover 2, you're trying to push everything out to the side. Short yardage plays, short passes, things like that. You don't want things happening deep and down the middle. And far too often so far this season, that's been happening for the Cowboys. Perhaps the moving Skandrick into the starting lineup will help. Perhaps moving Ernie Sims into the starting lineup at weak side linebacker will help. We saw Sean Lee get beat on that touchdown pass to Antonio Gates on Sunday. I don't think the Cowboys have found the answer yet, but the yardage isn't necessarily as important as the points. And as you pointed out, even though they've had those 2 400-yard passing games, what's a bigger concern to Monty Kiffin is the fact that they gave up 30 or more points in both of those games. Yeah. That's a bigger concern to him than the yardage.
And all this uncertainty when they're getting ready to take on a team that's got the most explosive offense in the league right now and the highest scoring by far. There's nobody even close to the Broncos. And then you got to deal with Peyton Manning on top of all of that.
Yeah, this is a diverse electric football team right now, and Peyton Manning is certainly driving the bus. 16 touchdown passes. What really amazes me, no interceptions.
Yeah.
This team hasn't thrown a pick yet in games. I mean, that's unheard of. I mean, the last 2 games, Manning has completed at least 80% of his passes. And, if you're thinking that Monty Kiffin might have some sort of magic elixir, because of the cover 2, well, I went back and looked at the 2 meetings that they had when Kiffin was in Tampa, and Manning beat him both times. And one time Manning beat him on sheer will. It was that Monday night game where they were down 35-14 in the fourth quarter, and they came back to win. And Manning had huge numbers that night. And 4 years later, they met again, and he beat him with, rather pedestrian numbers, 253 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. What Manning excels at is picking the right poison. In those 2 games against Kiffin, when Manning was in Indy and Kiffin was in Tampa, they actually scored more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns in those games. You may think that you can best Peyton Manning by loading up and trying to take the pass away, but he's extremely adept at saying, fine, I'll just hand the ball to the running back. And that makes Noshawn Moreno a very dangerous player on Sunday. Even though they've only rushed for 4 touchdowns, Moreno has really become revitalized in this offense, and he can really hurt a team if you're selling out to trying to stop Peyton Manning too much.
Okay. Now let's talk about the offense. One story coming out today, Tony Romo apparently in the offseason changed his throwing motion. Where'd that come from?
I don't know, because I really haven't detected a change in his throwing motion at all. Players make fine-tuning to their fundamentals every off-season. Romo has always been one of those guys, like Phillip Rivers a week ago, who throws the football from multiple angles, can move his arm around and make things happen in ways that other quarterbacks can't. You don't see Peyton Manning take his arm down and throw it sidearm like Romo does at times. Certainly, we've seen more accuracy out of Romo. We've seen a higher level of avoiding mistakes out of Romo. Perhaps he felt that fine-tuning his fundamentals, throwing the football might lead to that. Perhaps it was something the Cowboys requested. I don't really detect a huge change in his throwing motion, but as quarterback coaches will tell you, it really doesn't take a huge change in the throwing motion to elicit big results.
Okay, one of the things that we're talking about is throwing motion. He's having a terrific year right now. Completion percentage is way up there. Touchdown to interception ratio is terrific right now. Only thrown 1 pick so far all season long, and yet the yards per attempt number is down. And looking at some of the numbers, Pro Football Focus threw out the fact that the Cowboys have been extremely conservative in the passing game. They're not taking shots down the field like they have in the past. Play calling, is that a problem? What do you make of this? I mean, obviously they're not scoring the points they need to score.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I noticed that conservative bent in the play calling as early as the Kansas City game. They really did not venture down the field much. It's interesting because we talk a lot about how Bill Callahan, is more of a run-oriented coach because of his background in the offensive line, but he does have that West Coast element that Jason Garrett does not have in his offense. So I think what we're seeing a little more of that West Coast bent, which is really built on short and intermediate passes. You saw it last week on that drive late in the first quarter, early in the second quarter against San Diego, where Callahan used short passes to kind of break up the monotony of the first 3 drives, and he actually used the passing game to set up the run, which is a true West Coast offense principle. The Cowboys went conservative at times last year, I think because they felt they had to because of all the injuries and all the issues that they were having running the football. They were using the passing game to a certain degree to run the football. I think this is a bit more of a philosophical bent. Surely you have to imagine that Jason Garrett is involved in that decision-making, that Jason Garrett is on board with what they're doing. But certainly they're not throwing the ball vertically as much as they were a year ago. It's funny. ProFootballReference.com classifies Jason Garrett's offense as an Air Coryell offense. And if you remember the Chargers teams from the 1980s, they threw the football down the field constantly. This is not an Air Coryell offense.
No.
This is some sort of a West Coast Coryell hybrid, and right now it's leaning very much toward the West Coast bent.
Well, is this a good thing, though? Because to me, in my way of thinking, they're not able to run the ball consistently on third and fourth down. They can't pick up 1 or 2 yards at a time, and it would seem like they're going to have to continue to get big plays in the offense to be able to get points because of that. I mean, so to go conservative right now just seems like you're going backwards.
I think what they're doing, to a certain degree, the conservative play calling in the passing game is helping Tony Romo, because I think he's making that's part of the reason why he's making fewer mistakes. But I agree with you that eventually they're going to have to open things up, and perhaps they've been waiting to get their offensive line issues straightened out. I think they're actually fairly close to getting the running game untracked. I mean, I thought DeMarco Murray, even with the short number of carries he got last week, had a good game, and a good game before that against St. Louis. Perhaps we're waiting to see if things coalesce over the next couple of weeks, especially when they go into those games with Philadelphia and Washington. And if they see the kind of improvement they're looking for, maybe they open things up a little bit more and they go a little vertical more. Because in the vertical passing game, the running game is vital. The running game is important in the West Coast, but you can manufacture a running game in the West Coast offense because to a certain degree you use those short pass plays as run plays. If you're going to run a vertical or an Air Coryell offense, having a good running game is vital because you have to be able to run play action out of it on second and third down.
Okay, and then on top of this, the other thing about going more conservative is kind of astounding when you think about the fact that Tony Romo, a noted gunslinger, is supposedly so much more involved in the game planning now, and I'm just having a hard time putting all that together in my brain, that a gunslinger quarterback with that much input in the offense is gone so much more conservative.
Well, you know what? To a certain degree, this is the kind of Tony Romo that Cowboys fans have wanted. They wanted a guy who gunslings less and completes more passes and moves the football down the field more efficiently. To some degree, this is exactly what Cowboys fans have wanted. On the other hand, all gunslingers, to a certain degree, have to become more conservative if they're going to become more successful. Look at Brett Favre. I mean, I think we look at him as the ultimate gunslinging quarterback. But with those 2 Super Bowl teams, he ratcheted it down a little bit and became a little bit less of a gunslinger. Donovan McNabb was kind of a gunslinger when he came out of college and came into the NFL. He had to ratchet it down a little bit to temper what the Eagles wanted to do on offense, and it eventually led to the Super Bowl. Every quarterback who I think we classify as a gunslinger goes through this sort of maturation process, and at some point in their career, they become a little bit more conservative, and the trade-off is hopefully you win playoff games and you win championships. John Elway's a great example. He was a take chances quarterback quite frequently throughout his career, and it wasn't until late in his career when he got a quarterback who understood how to use them. He got a running game, and he was willing to sacrifice, trying to force passes into small spaces that might get picked off. That the Broncos won 2 Super Bowl championships in a row. So I think from the standpoint of trying to win more games, it could be a good thing. But there are other things that are moving around in that offense right now that are preventing it from scoring touchdowns and scoring the points they need to win games.
And it would seem like they're going to need every point they can get because they're probably going to have to outscore the Broncos if they're going to have any chance to win, right?
I agree. I don't think this is going to be a situation where you can slow down Peyton Manning that much. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Broncos scored 40 points against the Cowboys on Sunday, and that wouldn't necessarily be a bad day for the Cowboys, to be honest with you, depending on how those points are scored. But I don't see slowing this team down that much because they've got the injury issues up front. And now they're kind of shuffling things a little bit on the back 7. I think that could lead to missed assignments. It's going to be a very rough game and a very difficult game for them to win.
If they're going to win, what has to happen?
Well, I think the best defense they have is a solid running game. You know, I actually saw an article earlier this week saying it was basically Manning versus Murray, and I tend to agree with that. You know, if you're gonna win this game, you got to keep Peyton Manning off the field as much as you possibly can. That means having a solid running game, a solid offense all the way around, moving the chains, possessing the football for huge chunks at a time. You know, basically doing what the Chargers did to them last week in the second half. Just hanging on to the football offensively as long as you possibly can. I think that's number one. The second thing is make Peyton Manning as uncomfortable as you possibly can. I know they're probably going to be at least a man down on Sunday, but they have to find ways to manufacture a pass rush. And third, Manning won't make many mistakes, but in both of his games against Monty Kiffin in the past, he has thrown an interception. When you do get Peyton Manning to make that rare mistake, you have to make him pay for it. You have to score a touchdown off that mistake. So even if they get just one turnover from the Broncos on Sunday, they've got to convert that turnover into a touchdown. They cannot settle for field goals in a game like this.
All right, bottom line, is it going to take a miracle for them to win this ball game this weekend?
I don't know if a miracle is the right word, but I think they're going to have to play by far their best game of the year. I mean, I think you take that game against the Rams and I think you multiply it by 10. I think that's how well they're going to have to play to win this game. And I think if you're the Cowboys, you want to come out of this game with two things, win or lose. You want to come out of this game without a lot of injuries, and you want to come out of this game without losing a whole lot of confidence, because you've got two games that arguably are much bigger after this when you play Philadelphia and Washington. There's a distinct possibility that they could be tied for the divisional lead with both of those teams if Dallas loses and both of those teams win. They could all be 2-3, and that makes those next two games extremely important.
All right, Matthew. Well, what can we look forward to in the next couple of days on Rattle and Hum Sports?
Well, the Kiffin versus Manning article will be up soon. We'll be keeping you up to date with injuries and obviously the usual Sunday stuff as we get ready for what I think should be what I hope will be a very interesting game with the Broncos on Sunday.
Yeah, well, everybody's kind of hesitant to say anything much more than that right now. So, I think the confidence level is down in these Cowboys against that high-powered Broncos offense.
And I think it would be down against – I think any team would be down confidence-wise against the Broncos. They're just playing – they kind of remind me of that Patriots team that went undefeated several years ago in the regular season. Of course, they lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl that year, but they kind of remind me of that team right now. They just seem to be executing on such a tremendous level. And what's really insane from a defensive standpoint, they've been playing very well defensively without Von Miller and without Champ Bailey. When they get those guys back, they could be far and away the best team in the league.
Yeah, and we may get to see a little bit of that best team in the league on this weekend, no question. All right, Matthew, thanks very much for coming on with us as always.
No problem, Bryan. Appreciate it.
Matthew Postins covering the Dallas Cowboys on Rattle and Hum Sports. This is a Rattle and Hum Sports podcast. I'm Bryan Houston. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.